All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Voices of the Industry. This is your host, Mike Pugh. And this week, I have a special guest, longtime friend. Had to work up to this one, ladies and gentlemen, because, he is well accomplished in his field, much respected in my own friend group. This week, we have Stephen Eusebio with us.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
No, I appreciate you coming on, man. You're have a lot of experience being a character animator, both for cinematics and in gaming, you know. So definitely want to get your insight because so far I've had a lot of people in the visual effects industry working on film and television. So I thought to keep expanding that out and be like, oh man, Steven's an awesome animator, much respected by his peers and definitely myself since I went to school with him. So we've known each other for, as we were talking off air, almost 20 years coming up on
Almost,
that.
dude. Almost. It's crazy how long it's been.
Yeah, it's been a long time, but more so than that, it's been a long time since we've had to sit down and chatted with each other. So this is going to be not just a bit of information coming from him, but also a chance for me and him to catch up. So hope you guys are in for the ride. And I just want to start things off by, I know we haven't had that conversation personally of, I know you've always been an artist. If we're hanging out, you'd be the first one to whip out a sketch pad and start sketching people around us. Um,
That's true.
I know drawing's in your blood. Art is something that you've always wanted to pursue, but I never got a whole story of exactly like that whole, since little Eusebio to now. Yeah, why you're so passionate about art. What is it about that speaks to you, man?
Yeah. So, you can consider me, I guess, one of the fortunate ones in that I've always kind of known. I didn't really even think about it as a question. It felt like it was a given. And like I always recall like this really strong memory that I had. Like I think it was like in kindergarten or preschool or something. I'm not necessarily sure how I can remember this in particular, but like, we were asked to draw some mural or whatever, what we wanted to be when we grew up or something like that. And of course, like, as any kid would do, I would drew like cartoons and toys and like characters from games and stuff. Even at that time when I was young, like Mario Brothers and Transformers toys and
Mm,
like even Spider-Man, right?
hmm
And so like you go up to the class, you show your mural, like, yeah, I want to make games, cartoons, and toys. Everybody went up and they did their thing, but like I actually meant it. You know what I mean? And I
mm.
recall being that young and I recall actually meaning it when I was telling the rest of this class of 5 or 6 year olds that I wanted to do that. I don't know. Yeah, I just always kind of knew.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, dude, I remember growing up and people would always see me just draw something and they'd be like, this guy's gonna be an artist. He's gonna do animation. Sign him up for Disney, since day one. And I always had cousins too that looked up to me, man, that respected the fact that I guess we had that same thing of we were just decisive. We just knew, and there was no questioning. There was no, oh, what about this career, that career? Even like my high school counselor, I remember they would ask me, are you sure? Yeah, I'm going to the art institute. You don't want any backup. That's it. You're just going to go to art school. You sure that's going to work out for you? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, always knowing that you want to do art. So I imagine, did you go to like a high school that had any like programs catered to arts?
Yeah. So like I grew up all up and down California until I moved like to the Philippines for high school.
Mm,
And education in the high school, I'm sorry, education in the Philippines is very, very different than it is here. It's very demanding, long hours, lots of subjects, not as much freedom of choice. Um, and so like our school in particular, like had all of the subjects, but it wasn't necessarily like considered like an art school or anything like that. Like actually quite the opposite. Like it was considered a business school
mm,
where a lot of the graduates would either go into some kind of medicine or some kind of business or some kind of science degree or something like that. And, like I did well in all of my classes. And, like, we were given aptitude tests as far as like what we should consider coming out of high school. But even then, like, I knew I was doing it, but I knew what I was going to do. And I don't need this. I know what I'm going to do. I
mm.
did it. And like, I scored like certain scores on certain subjects. But even with the scores that I had gotten, I mean, I had aptitudes in like science, math, and business, but I actually scored higher in those three than I did in art. I didn't care, you know. My mind was made up already, so it didn't really matter to me.
Mm. As soon as you mentioned the other courses and other marks you could get, I'm like, yo, Steven, as far as I know from this guy, high marks in everything, bro. I can't imagine you getting like a C in any class in any grade, unless it was really something where you just didn't even read or study and just phoned it in and you still like got a passing grade. Oh man. Um, no, dude. Yeah. So when did you end up coming back to the States? Did you come back for college or just moved back for other reasons?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, education in the Philippines is a little bit different in that there's no middle school.
Oh.
So, from sixth grade, you go straight into freshman year of high school. And so, high school graduates are actually a lot younger than they are here. And
Hmm.
so, by the time that like we were nearing like end of high school, like I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to leave. I couldn't wait to get back here. And like in my mind, I can't wait to get my life started. Like I couldn't
Mm.
wait. It couldn't happen or come soon enough. And so after I graduated high school, I graduated when I was 17. 2 weeks after I graduated high school, I moved back here to LA. And then a month later is when I started college.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was that fast for me because I wanted it to be that fast. I didn't want to wait anymore.
Mm. That's awesome. So was it like a normal college or was it actually AI that you started school?
No, it was AI, man. I was emailing with one of the like representatives in like student relations or whatever at the time. I think maybe 6 months to 8 months prior, or maybe 6 months prior to graduation to high school, making sure I had everything I needed to hit the ground running as soon as I got there. Right. So, like all the paperwork that I would need, all the info that I would need, if I needed to put together a portfolio, which I ended up not needing to, but I did anyway. And yeah, I did everything in my power I could to kind of fast track the process.
Awesome. Yeah, do you sound like me coming out of high school where I just couldn't wait to get out? I know there are some
Mhm.
people, I was kind of a jerk. There are some people wanting to keep in touch, like, oh, you got an email, you got a I think that back in the day was MySpace, it wasn't even Facebook yet. And I was like, nah, just because I just didn't click with anybody in high school. I was always an artsy guy.
Mhm.
Dude, freshmen would come up to me when I was a senior year and they thought I was like the lead singer of a band because we had like a dress code, right? I went to like an all boys private school and you had to keep it
uh-huh.
above the shoulder, your hair length. So of course my hair is just like hovering just right above my shoulders. And I had like a greasy hair look and stuff. So they would just come up to me because I had this like don't mess with me kind of vibe. And it's just because like, dude, I'm just in my own world, man. I'm like drawing, I'm writing, I'm coming up with stories, ideas. It's like I'm just in my notepad in my sketchbook all the time. And
Yeah.
so it was funny that mentality I had where it's like I just need to be in a space with other people like me. And maybe I'll find like
Yeah.
genuine, real friends, people I really connect with. And bro, look at it. Here we are, man. Like almost 20 years later. We still
Yeah.
keep in touch. You know, we still vibe. We still pick it up like it's like yesterday.
Yeah. Funny that you say that. My high school is actually pretty similar. Like as far as our dress code goes, it's very, very similar.
Mm,
Like we had to go to school basically in a suit, like with a blazer and a tie, and like we had the same rule of not having the hair anywhere near the collar,
mm,
And I kind of gave off a similar vibe as you did actually.
mm,
It's to almost kind of being a loner is like I guess it could be considered because I was always off on my own, like doing my own thing. I didn't care what anybody else thought, and I didn't
yeah.
really care what anybody else was up to because um, it was difficult to connect to people in high school in that way. There wasn't a lot of others kind of like quite on the same wavelength, and
Hmm.
I actually found people closer to similar wavelength outside of school, and so those people I really connected, and so
Mm,
there was this like really strange reputation of me being very mean and like really like what I mean? It's
mm.
strange, right? Like
Yeah,
you wouldn't
yeah.
consider me to be a mean person. I don't, what I mean? But like it's just strange to hear that, you know, there was a lot of involvement in our high school and a lot of group projects, even amongst like different levels. And so like a lot of the student body come to find out, like when we're paired to do like a lot of group plays or stuff like that, they actually found out who I really was. Like, oh, you're not at all, but like I thought you would be, or what I heard about you was like, what you heard? What are you talking about? It's like, oh yeah, like I heard like you were really scary and like you were really mean. It's like, wow, like where are you hearing this? Like where are you getting this? But
Mhm.
I
That's,
just thought it was funny.
I guess we always had like that similar kind of vibe because in our friend group, we were the only ones who didn't drink or we didn't like
Mm.
experiment with stuff. So, to be that artsy kind of person and they're like, no, I don't do any of that stuff. They'll call us like a straight edge or something to make it sound cool. But like, dude,
Mm.
I just don't participate. As you said, it was just a very much of like, if I rock with it, dope. If I don't,
Mm.
I'm not bothered. So I think
Mm.
so many people try to fit in or they feel like, I guess we just automatically knew like we just moved to a beat of a different drum. Like we just did our own thing and we were content with that. I mean, that's what made us feel fulfilled is being creative and being in that kind of space.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. And like on a personal level, I just didn't understand it. So like, and I felt no need to have to do it or want to do it. And like, I think what's great about our friends and the people that we connected with most is that like they didn't try and force it on us. They didn't try and like shame us for it. And they just accepted it like as like it was a part of who we were, you know? And um like even if they did put pressure on us, I highly doubt it would have made any difference. But I think probably the most important difference it would have made is that we probably would have fallen out of friendship pretty quickly.
Yeah, dude, I remember a mutual friend of ours, Adnan. I remember we were at one of our outings eating at BJ's.
Mm-hmm.
And he likes to socially drink, which is cool. And it was awesome the fact that in that one evening, I'm like, oh, let me have a root beer. And then he noticed as the server was going to hand me my drink, he's like, yo, that drink is a fizzing. That's a dark beer. And he called it out right away. And he's like, yo, this guy asked for a root beer. Send that back and give him his correct drink. And again, that's just kind of the respect that we have in our friend group, which we greatly value and appreciate. The fact that it's just without even like asking to or needing to, we vouch for each other and we got each other's backs. And
Uh,
it's dope to see that where it's like, yeah, dude, you could just be yourself and they could be themselves and you don't have to do the exact same thing to get along.
Love Adnan. Um, you know what's funny is that that exact same thing happened to me,
Oh,
and he had stepped in the exact same way he did for you. So, like, as I'm sure you may remember, yeah, after I say this out loud, but my go-to drink is an Arnold Palmer.
oh, yes, sir.
So, whenever a drink came to the table, and Adnan was like, "What did you order?" And I was like, "I got an Arnold Palmer." He's like, "That's not an Arnold Palmer." I was like, "How do you know?" He's like, "I can smell it from here." And sure enough, he was right. It was a light beer that was kind
Mm-hmm.
of like ale colored. And like, sure enough, we got it sent back and got the right drink. That's so funny. It happened for the both of us by the same person. It goes to show how close we all were and like how great of friends we are. So,
Yeah, man, college was awesome. And one thing I wanted to ask you real quick that I mentioned earlier off air was the fact that as far as I knew you, you were always like a hardcore Disney kid, man.
mhm.
I think there were even movies that you told me that you had to get new copies of because you like wore out the
Oh, yeah.
disc.
Oh,
Bro,
yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I knew, line for line, word for word, shot for shot. I knew them by heart. And yeah, I definitely was. I don't think I am as much as I was before.
hmm
While I appreciate like all of the artistry and like I have tons of friends that like work there now and it's just as not a big part of my identity as it was before. And I know that's probably strange for you and all the people that used to know me from before.
hmm
I know that's probably strange for you guys to hear, but that's where it's at with that.
No, right on. Yeah, the reason I brought it up was because, for those of us, when we were looking for art schools, we were always thinking of like what was the best fit for us. And when we grew up, it was known that Cal Arts was the premier school if you wanted to get into Disney. That was like a best roadmap to get there because a lot of those instructors, those teachers are veterans who used to work at Disney or still did. So that's kind of one thing I wanted to bring up, knowing that you were so into Disney at that time. I'm wondering if you tried to apply Cal Arts, like you mentioned, you were in the Philippines and then came straight to college here. I wonder if you just weren't aware that that was a path you could take.
Yeah, so you're definitely right. That's part of it. Actually, the biggest part of it was when I was looking into the Cal Arts program, like one at the time, I don't think the 3D curriculum was as developed as it may be now.
Mm,
This was way back in what, 2014 maybe?
hmm.
Oh no, wait, I'm sorry.
No,
2008? When did we go to college, Mike? 2008
we started college in 2005, my
or
friend.
2005? 2008 we graduated. Okay, yeah, yeah. It was around 2004 or 2005. And their 3D program or curriculum wasn't developed. It wasn't as developed probably as it is now. Also, their portfolio submissions were, I think it might have just been timing. Like I may have missed out, but
Mm.
I would have had to wait another year, the next portfolio review window.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And part of it was definitely my not knowing how big of an influence like going to CalArts might or might not have had, and like the history behind there, right? And a couple of the things that attracted me to like AI specifically was that one of my older cousins had gone to the AI in San Diego, and like he really enjoyed his time there and he was in the arts. And I was able to start right away. And like I had mentioned, where like I couldn't wait to start. And so it kind of just lined up perfectly.
It's funny. It's so weird. Like for me, it was a similar thing. I went to AI because also the window, because I found out that you needed to have this amazing portfolio to get into some of these art schools. And my mom at the time was pissed when she found out. She's like, I'm sending you to school to learn how to do this stuff. And yet they already want you to come at some level prepared, already having some of this knowledge
Mm,
and skill going in. Like,
mhm.
how? Unless
Yeah.
you were given these specialty classes outside of school, like a private tutor or something, or you were always going to like a campus that provide like observational drawing or something, you would never build this kind of skill level. I had taken a class at Otis to build a portfolio. And I got a compliment from the instructor. If he could, he would have given me a star for like most improved because he looked at where I started,
It's awesome.
my skill set to where I ended up, and he was like, "Wow, I never thought you would have got to that level at the end of the class. Maybe you could get in." And I passed on Otis because I'm like, you got to do a portfolio, and then would been later Art Institute. I was able to start that summer, and I think we did
Mhm.
start at the same time.
We did.
So we just thought as like, why wait till the fall? Let's get the ball rolling now. Both
Yeah.
of us not fully aware that AI would eventually grow to have a reputation and is no longer with us. If I could, I would pour one out for AI, but I did that with G's interview, so I'm not going to do that again. But but at the end of the day, you know, going into day one where we actually met, where we both had a color theory class. And I remember coming in and I sat next to somebody who maybe I could bring on one day. I don't know. My good friend Travis Mangamo sat next to him and we became instant friends and lifelong afterwards. And
Mhm.
then coming through, I see this crew of guys coming in, with G, who I mentioned earlier, who hopefully the audience is familiar with. And I see you rolling in with someone else. And I'm just like, who are these guys, man? For like the rest of the school year, my buddy Travis and I, like, who are these guys? Like, we see them. They seem like a really fun group of guys. They seem really tight and close knit. And it was like since
Yeah.
day one, it's like, man, there's something to these guys if they never met before, we assumed. And yet the
Mhm.
first day, like you guys were just like as thick as thieves, as they say.
Yeah. Yeah. Thinking about it in that way, it's pretty crazy. I don't quite understand how we were able to click and gel so well that fast. And I think you had described it best in that it felt like we knew each other forever, even though we had just met. I remember my first day well, and I remember that color theory class very well. I think I'm early, right? Because at the time when I started college, I couldn't drive yet. I was too young.
Mhm.
So I was there early, just sitting in class, chilling, and just, waiting for it to start. I think I'm like one of the first ones there, probably the first one there in an empty classroom. Sure enough, this other tall, lanky dude walks in and like he sits next to me. He doesn't say anything for like an awkward amount of time. I'm sure it was only like a few minutes, but it probably felt like, I don't know, half an hour or something. But finally, he introduces himself like, "Hey man, my name's G, blah blah blah." And from the moment like we dapped each other up, it's been that way ever since. We've been incredibly, incredibly close.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I still at least message G on almost a daily basis. We just chat back and forth, or whether it be games, which I don't know. We might touch on a little game called Marvel. I don't know. That's a bit of a spicy. That's a dangerous danger zone caution tape conversation there. For those who know in the 90s, who grew up and knew of the Marvel video games and like to play fighting games, they all know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I would hope so.
So we're gonna table that. But yeah, dude, it was wild. Yeah, eventually I remember after a year, my buddy Trav was like, yo, man, we would dine at this establishment called Caro's, a little restaurant they had in the business park where our school resided.
Yeah.
And yeah, we just come in as we always do, and we just see, yeah, you and G and Emroy hanging out, having lunch, and Trav was like, Mike, it's time. Let's introduce ourselves. Let's sit down with these guys, see what they're all about. And that was it. From that point on, the crew just grew and grew. Next thing you know, Fuzz eventually joined into the group. Next thing you know, other people. Eventually, we got to go like, yeah, Nick Pears and Anand. And
Yeah, yeah. It's strange because I don't remember ever us gradually becoming close. You know what I mean?
mm,
I think because of our friendship, it always felt like, oh, we were always this close. I don't
yeah,
I don't ever recall us like never not being close. We were just talking about it earlier, and that like I actually don't necessarily recall how we became like as close as we are and like great friends. It always felt like we were.
yeah, it just clicked, man. I remember, oh, it's just memory lane, bro. I just remember, yeah, once Travis became roommates with Anand and Nick,
Oh yeah.
we just always were there.
Yeah, always there.
Always there playing either Smash Melee or Marvel's Capcom 2. I just want to say the name. I remember that one time. It was just so epic, man. And how we're just all on the same wavelength. I remember when I went to go see The Dark Knight, bro.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh. Hmm.
That was so epic because we saw the movie. We came out of the movie theater. We couldn't speak, bro. We were just in awe of that film. And I remember we walked like 2, 3 blocks to the cars, you know, because there was like 8 of us or something, 6 or 8 of us rolling up to see that film. We got back to, Anand's and Travis and Nick's apartment. And then we were just still the whole time, the walk, the drive. And then when we got back to the place, we didn't utter a single word. And in true G fashion, he breaks the silence and it's like, that was a pretty good movie, huh? And then we just knocked out. And then the next day, we were able to speak about it. But it's just funny how we were just all on the same page of just like, that's a movie.
Yeah. I don't think there were a lot of things that came out around that time like that were like at that level. And so
Mhm.
like when you see something like that, it's a lot to process, especially if you understand like how difficult it is to make and you understand like the structure of the story and the characters and all that.
Mhm.
Um it's a lot to process and it's also like a lot to be in awe of. And I think that would probably explain why like a lot of us probably had a hard time finding words to say, but also probably didn't feel the need to say much because we all knew we were feeling the same way about it.
Yeah, that was incredible. I remember that so vividly just because at that time we thought most of us would end up in animation. But still, part of us were like, maybe we would want to do like visual effects for live action movies. Maybe we want to work on TV shows. Maybe we would want to end up working on Samurai cartoons, which some of our friends got the opportunity to. A lot of people we went to school with came out and did exactly what they said they were going to set out to do, which is amazing. A part of us felt like if we could be a part of something like that, that would be like the feather in the cap of all of our careers to be able to say, like, I was part of that production, be able to be part of something that I know is going to inspire other potential aspiring filmmakers.
Yeah, that's it.
And yeah, that's why we appreciate it so much. And I know from a fanboy perspective, a lot of us like Batman. A lot of us like comic book movies or comic books in general. I still remember the
Mm-hmm.
first time I came over your pad and I just saw like the
Oh
rows of
yeah.
sleeved comic books and like in mint condition. And just, when I'll be like, oh man, what's that book? And then just see the way you like pluck it from the shelf, dust it off, and the way you handed it over to me, I knew like, okay, I gotta treat this with reverence and respect because this is a I appreciate keeping things nice and tight, but also like, when you see someone treat something with reverence and respect, you can't help but mirror that back. Especially when I speak to kind of what you meant to our friend group, as Anon would like to coin the nickname for you, Papa Steven.
Oh man, I forgot about that.
Yeah, bro. Um,
Oh man,
and I respected
that was
that.
so good.
It's funny because, I know he would always say it in jest, to be joking around and stuff. But nah, man, I have to say, like within our group, you always had this level of like maturity about you that I had to like acknowledge and respect. And like when you put your foot down, where you feel this type of way, you're like, oh man, we upset Steven. But like when you decided to like, gather the troops and try to, even though we couldn't finish it, and I wish we did, but when you spearheaded
Yeah.
your own short film in school, right away we're like, of course, like Steven's going to run the project, he'll be the director, and all of us, Travis and I would be the lighters for the project. Nick would help out with animation. Like we just knew that where we fell in line in that order, calling rank. And it was just because like I always felt like you always brought it as an artist. There was a
Mhm.
class that we had together, a ZBrush class, where we had to sculpt characters. And even though our teacher, Nick Marks, was always repping and like bragging about his game art students, because we were in
Mhm.
animation and he would always like be fanboying for his game art students. But then when one of them had to go up against you, he was like, man, it's almost like he was like keeping a tally on the side of like game art versus animation, you know? And he was just hoping that his team would like edge us out at the end of the quarter. But nah, man, not when you had Steven in the class, not when you had Travis in the class. I got a dub one time. You also had Fuzz
Oh,
in there.
absolutely.
We had some people representing for our team. Our dead ringer, when you stepped up, that teacher was just like, bro, I'm trying to root for my guys, but Steven's just goated, man.
That's something that I really appreciated about like our group because like I think it's a part of my personality in that I'm really competitive. That would probably explain a lot as to why like I love fighting games and I love sports. And that competition kind of trickles over to like a lot of other things, including like artwork and especially in like the setting of a school and where everyone's trying to find their footing and like kind of um, you know, find themselves and like establish themselves. Like, granted, the thing that was being run in the class was called Fight Club. So, I mean, there was no better like stage for that. But even
Mhm,
outside of that, a lot of us were very competitive with one another.
mhm,
And I appreciate that a lot. We were able to push ourselves and push each other really healthily,
mhm.
right? Because, we would always hats off to, whoever quote unquote won. Admittedly, I was a very, very, very bad loser.
No way. No.
I've gotten I've gotten better at managing that. It's something I'll attribute to like everything that's kind of come after it. Just our healthy competition amongst our friend group.
Bro, I'll never forget, man. It always haunts me, bro. Anytime I pick up controller and it says Marvel versus Capcom, I think, oh my God. It was a three versus three fighting game,
Yeah.
right? So you can cycle through your three characters on each team. Each person had three characters. But, if I took away one of Steven's characters, it was game over. Steven's a very nice, loving, compassionate guy. But if I took out one of his characters, that went away. I see that leave his eyes, and it's like, now you done it, Mike. I'm like, it's just one, bro. You still got two. He's like, no, 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 no. This is not allowed. I'm like, but Steven, you're just way better than me. It's okay. You're still gonna win. Like, it doesn't matter. I need to destroy you, Mike. Now it's time. And bro, I ain't gonna lie, I missed that, man.
Yeah, I miss it too, man.
I still need to get my hands on the Marvel collection. I know it just came out.
It did, yeah.
I need to get my hands on it. And both G and I, he's really busy at the moment, but I keep telling him, dude, we have to do. And if you got time, bro, we'll definitely should be the three of us build our
Mhm.
dream Marvel 4 game, Marvel's Capcom 4
Oh,
dream roster. I know a lot of people have done it online, but I don't care about their rosters. I care about the homies. We'd be playing all night sometimes.
yeah. It's true. That's very true.
I want to know what we want to be in the most ideal situation because now the dream is alive again. And I lose count of how many times I dream that I'm playing a new Marvel game.
Oh, wow.
And then I wake up and I'm just like grasping at my dream as it fades away. I'm like, come back. I was just playing you. It was such a sick roster, sick gameplay mechanics. I'm like, it's gone now. Like, no, Mike, it was never real to begin with. I'm like, darn you, imagination. You plague me in my dreams sometimes. Back on topic. As everyone can tell, we went to the Art Institute. We graduated in about 2008. What was it like for you coming out of school, man? What was the first gig that you got into?
Yeah, so I think even leading up to graduation, I had gotten freelance gigs here and there, and it was nice to like just get my feet wet even before graduating. But I think like the most noticeable one that I had landed outside of school and I guess after I had graduated was for a previous company. And I was there not for very long, but at the time, okay, it was somewhat of like a dream project. Mike knows this as well as all of my other close friends do, in that I'm a really big Airbender fan. The first thing that I had gotten to work on or outside of school was just pre-visualization for the Airbender movie that was eventually going to come out.
Ah,
And I was, yeah, and I was stoked and I was incredibly excited to be working on it. And then, it came out and then I was less excited. Um,
to say the least.
yeah, that was the first one. I should say that was like the first gig of like wading into the industry that was an industry job, even though it was like very short contract. But yeah, I think that was it.
All right on. Any other like notable gig that you got after that?
After let's see, when did we graduate? 2008. It wasn't summer, right? I think it was the fall of 2008, right? Something like
Hmm.
that, like right before the end of the year. I think maybe a few weeks out of graduation, I had landed the previs and I had landed just a few other gigs here and there that were pretty short. And then eventually I made my way into advertising, kind of, I guess, teaming up with some other people from our friend group. And I was there for a while. Like I was there for a long while. I think like 8.5 years, something like that.
Oh, wow, dude.
Yeah. So I started as like junior 3D artist, obviously. And a lot of the work that I was doing there was like generalist work, right?
Mm,
So I got to dabble in a little bit of everything and I got to learn a little bit of everything. Pretty similar to our school, right? Because I think you know
yeah,
better than most in that our school wasn't very focused necessarily, right?
true.
It taught way more technical and know-how and software versus like principles and theories and foundation, even though we did get solid foundation. But I started as a junior artist, and then by the time I left, and like I think a few years even before I left, I had made my way to like the head of the department. And while there, I learned a ton. It was a fantastic time for me and in my life and in my career, and I met a ton of wonderful people. Got to work on a couple of like really cool things. Not necessarily as close to like the furnaces of fire creation that I would hope, right? Because it's marketing for something, and like the ideal is that you want to be working on the something.
Hmm.
And I had found that like, and sorry, this is kind of like dovetailing into something else, but I had found that while I was there, or like probably like a few years into it, while I was there, I wasn't learning enough of what I wanted to learn.
Hmm.
I was learning a ton about a lot of other things, but it wasn't something that I wanted to specialize in or what I wanted to learn more about. I couldn't find that at work. So I knew if I wanted to get as good as I wanted to get or achieve what I wanted to achieve, get where I wanted to go, I had to find that instruction or that kind of like avenue to push myself outside of work.
Hmm.
And, that kind of a commitment shouldn't be taken lightly because it's not easy. Like working an 8 to 9 hour job. And then, well, it eventually led to like taking schooling and
Mhm.
additional learning outside of work. So, like, it's not a light undertaking, as I was saying. It's like advertising, we work like long hours. So, like, a standard day is like a 9 hours to 10 hours, 5 days a week. And so, on top of that, like doing hours of schoolwork, like after that, it's not easy. But I knew I had to do it in order to get to where I wanted to go and what I wanted to achieve. And like, but to me, if it was just up to hard work and investment and like grind, that's a no brainer for me. That's easy work for me to do. For I think an entire year, my days were just like 8:30 to like 7:30. I'd be at work. I'd allow myself maybe like 30 minutes or an hour of like exercise.
Mhm.
And then maybe from like 8:30 to like 1:30 or 7:30 to 1:30 in the morning, I'd be working on my stuff outside of work.
Right on, man. Yeah, because yeah, dude, all of us remember how much you just loved animation. As I mentioned earlier, you were big into Disney early on, and then all I can remember is like your goal was to work at Pixar. That was your dream job to be a character animator at Pixar. And yeah, dude, speaking of you quoting movies, there's so many instances where someone would start a line, you would catch wind
Uh,
of it, and you'll finish it, and you would just kind of give us that look. We're like, oh, Steven. We know, bro. We know the day will come. That's what we were all hoping. And we thought, like, if any one of us in the group, like, you should be the one to be working at Disney, working on Pixar. And I remember that was a steady gig. I can't remember it was that long, 8.5 years, but I remember you were there for a good amount of time. And I'm familiar with being a journalist. That was my first gig, was just kind of knowing everything and be able to put together an entire package for a client. Yeah, I remember thinking like, man, but Steven wants to be an animator. When's that going to happen? I know we can find ourselves in that. It feels like a rut where like
mm,
it just feels like, I just don't care about that. It's something I can do, I can knock out, but it's not what's going to really get you out of the bed in the morning. It's not really going to be what's going to drive you to say, I'm going to do this for another 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So yeah, dude, let's talk about you going after that goal of trying to be an animator, and make
yeah.
that happen.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, as I mentioned, like outside schooling had everything to do with it. And it was, you know, years. Well, I wouldn't say necessarily. Well, yeah. I mean, it can be considered as years. So, like, I started while working, I started going to Animation Mentor. I didn't have to start from all the way at the beginning. I didn't have to start from scratch because I had prior experience and they had just opened up their advanced placement program, right? So I got to
Mm,
start halfway through and then I graduated maybe 6 to 8 months later, something like that. I forget. I met some fantastic people there. I met some like great people and like really lifelong friends there. And then after Animation Mentor was done, I continued to look for more and more ways to get better. Right. So I
mm,
took a number of Anim Squad classes right
mm,
after that. And so I think it's important to note that I would gauge myself every year because, when you're kind of looking at your own work and you're kind of looking at where you've come from, it's very easy to almost get into like an echo chamber kind of mentality
mm,
of like, wow, look how far I've progressed. Like I've made a lot of progress and, like I should be good now. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily up to you to decide.
mhm.
And so getting a kind of reality check was great because, like, look, everyone's learning curve is different.
Yeah.
That took a long time for me to like wrestle with. I wrestled with that a lot. Eventually I came to that realization of like, okay, my learning curve is going to be my own. And
Mhm.
so I need a way to be able to test and check myself and how my progress is going. And so at the end of every year, I'd go to CTN. I'd go to the CTN trade show, and
Mhm.
every big booth would have free demo reel reviews. All you have to do is sign up. And even like a lot of the animators that were working in the industry were tabling. They had tables and they were there selling artwork, talking to people. And more often than not, like they were so kind and so generous with their time in that they would
Mm,
give me real reviews if I asked.
mm,
And so every year I would do that. I would get feedback. I would see what they say, and I'd go back. I'd do it all over again. I'd start the new year because I think CTN's close to the end of the year. I'd
Yeah.
start the new year with more classes, get better and better and better,
Mhm.
and then I would test again, go back to CTN, see what they say. And it was just rinse and repeat like that for a while.
Mhm.
I think actually it was like 2 years. And then by the third year is when I got an opportunity that I felt comfortable leaving my job for, because at that point I was able to build a pretty good life for myself, with the stability of the job that I had and how fulfilling it was for me, even though it wasn't like animation in particular. I had finally gotten let's say, like the right calling in leaving that job for a job at Blizzard.
Oh, nice. That's right, man.
Yeah.
I know so many people would think that if you got a chance to work at any big studio that instantly people know the name of, it's like, why wouldn't you take that opportunity? I know you've been there for a minute too, right?
Since 2017. So
Hmm.
what is it? 7 years now? Almost eight?
Yeah. Oh, dude, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, dude, especially for us these days, we're getting close to that age where years just fly by and you really gotta be mindful of how you spend it because it's like water.
It really is.
Flows so freely. Um, yeah, man. Trying to think of one to backpedal or anything, but oh, when you mentioned our core foundational, I did want to give a shout out to Marjan. Those who've seen Incredibles, they know. If not, be sure to take one of her life drawing classes.
Yeah. Her class.
I've never seen someone just build you up and tear you down in an instant. Lovely, darling, beautiful, beautiful. D plus. You're like, whoa, man, how you said my work was beautiful, amazing. You're like, yeah, but all this is wrong. That angle's wrong. This is wrong. You put too much line weight here. I'm like, yeah, but I loved it. And I think that was one of the first instructors that really kind of backed up that idea of what you were talking about of everyone has their own learning curve. Everyone moves at their own
Mhm.
pace because she heavily emphasized to us as students that she's like, yo, I sucked. I started, I couldn't draw at all. I had no talent, but I worked so hard to learn, to develop things like second nature where she can tell. She can tell if you drew something because you understood, or you drew something because you were trying to figure it out, or you can't judge something from a glance. And she can tell that about you, how well you can pick up and understand things. And no, I love that from some of our instructors, man. They really came down hard on us and they were really disappointed, which I think was partially what led to the downfall of the school when they weren't able to hold a standard where they start to it's like, oh, we'll let this slide, we'll let that slide. But when we were
Yeah.
going there, they were so hard on us. And yeah, we were hard on each other too, man. And we also made sure that because we play games a lot, and they made sure that we stayed back on track.
Yeah. Funny thing about AI or like any school, really, especially now that I've done a lot of secondary learning and now like even being a teacher myself,
Mm,
you really get out what you put into it,
mm,
regardless of the school. And even working with people from all different schools, like all kinds of schools, like from AI, from CalArts, from Ringling, from Goblins, from wherever, right?
mm, mm,
Regardless of the school and regardless of the institution, like there are a couple of things that always stay consistent. Like from a student's perspective, like one, you'll really get out of it what you put into it.
mm,
Every school, regardless of like how revered they are, every school has their wide variety of students,
mm,
right? Like we know firsthand that like the dropout rate or the drop off rate after the first quarter, after the first year was astronomical,
mm.
right?
Yeah.
And that's not just because of like our school or the student body or how it was like viewed. That happens at every school. You know what I mean?
Mm,
And so, like, I know it's got a bad rap, but like, I know we got the most we possibly could out of it because we put so much into it. We invested so much. So,
mm.
our return was just as big.
I think the beautiful thing is that we found our group. So it's like, we invested so much in each other. Like anytime there was a project where we could have a team of us together, we would rope each other in and try to work on and get it done. And yeah, we just naturally clicked for one. He had similar interests. Yeah, we were all crazy about Airbender when that dropped. And we were all excited about the same stuff. And I think that's the thing I always get annoyed too when I see it. It's usually fabricated, like in these fake shows and whatever. This whole thing of you gotta tear other people down to build yourself up so that you can succeed.
No.
That kind of thing is just so nonsense because that's not what we experienced. That's not what drove
No.
us. What drove me was Travis would show up, do something, he get complimented, like, man, I could beat Travis. I could actually something better than that. And then, but it was interesting because even when I got older, someone made a comment to me about how I was complimenting where Travis is at. You know, I'm like, he's at Disney, he's got a beautiful wife and kids, he's got a great situation going, you know, he's trying to get a house. I'm like, I'm so proud and happy for him and what he's accomplished. And the immediate response I got from this person was, "Oh, so you want what he has?" And I'm like, that is not what I just said,
That's
you
not the
know.
same thing.
It's not
No.
the same
Yeah.
thing. It's just like I know how hard he worked to get to where he is. I know what he put into it, and I know how much people respect and value him based on what his daily contributions. And it's like I admire him because he walked his path and he got to exactly where he wanted to be. And, you know, he lives, I don't want to be trendy and say he lives his truth, but I would argue more so like he walked his path, you know, confidently and with assurance of, you know, he's carrying everyone else with him. You kind of deal if he can't, he would. And it's not
That's
about, yeah.
no, no, I'm sorry, please.
No, I feel like I'm just gonna get more like mopey or like too emotional about it. But it's just because there's a lot of love and respect there.
It's so strange for people to consider that crab mentality of like needing to pull the other one down in order for you to bring yourself up.
Hmm.
It's so like antiquated and it's so I can only speak from my experience, but it's so much like the opposite of what I've experienced in my career. And the more I advance in my career, and like obviously, the more I advance in my professional vertical, and as far as like my titles go, like the more you come to realize that like leadership roles, they're not roles of that of a dictator. They're more so a role of being a force multiplier.
Mm.
And I think there's a very, very big misconception, which constitutes to a lot of like unhappy people, maybe people placed in the wrong positions. It's very strange. That's still, you know, that kind of mentality or that saying or whatever, it still has like legs to this day.
It's funny how you always attract like similar type of people because I know part of why I wanted to do a podcast is I would have discussions with my friend where we would really talk about stuff like that. You know, we would just kind of look at things from a perspective and kind of expand upon it and wish to kind of impart some type of, you know, have a conversation that we think people should want to be a part of, you know, and kind of exploring things, ideas like that, which can be seen as maybe counterculture, but it's not really counter in terms of trying to be like that kid that just wants to go against the norm and just be different. But it's counter because it's highlighting something that may have been lost or overlooked. And usually overstepped because a lot of people, what you just described, it took time for you to say, you know what, I want to pivot to what I really want to do, but I need this time to pivot. I need this time to really grow the skill and really say, you know what, I want to have that position. What actually qualifies me for that position, as opposed to how can I shortcut to get there? And I think a lot of us want to have that quick solution or that overnight success. And in reality, it's like, yo, man, these people work really hard. I mean, like you mentioned, you know, I don't follow sports as much as I used to, Kobe, but since then, it hasn't been the same for me. But I really love that documentary of Jordan on Netflix, The Last Dance. That was such an amazing documentary where Jordan had a highlight. Do you not understand how many hours I put in? Even when he talks about trying to go varsity, I think for his high school basketball team, how he went up to his coach, is like, I'm going to play varsity. And the coach was like, all right, show me what you got. Here's a whole list of things you need to work on.
Mhm.
Over the summer, Jordan worked his butt off on all those things, came by the next year. I told you I was going to make your team. But a lot of people just want to see the success and not understand like the dedication. And even though he's an incredibly talented basketball player, he still works so hard. And even he had to say, you know what? It's not all about me playing well. Sure, I'm the first one off the court, last one off, but I can't be the only one to do that. And then he worked, encouraged his entire team to work just as hard as he was. And then that's why they got the triples, you know?
Yeah. It's always the tip of the iceberg that people see, right? They don't
Mm,
understand necessarily like what it takes and not just what it takes, but how much work has actually been put in. And I think the funny thing about that is it's all relative. And this kind of goes back to everyone's journey. It's going to be different. I remember like wrestling with that for a while too, in realizing that like this is not a cookie cutter path. There is no such thing. There's only your path, and that's it. You
mm,
know, and like the constant comparisons that you may make or you tend to make because a lot of your gauge of your talent or your artwork or like I guess like your standing or how good you are, quote unquote, right,
mm,
is through comparison, especially like when you're first starting out. Like,
mm,
oh, my stuff doesn't look as good as their stuff. Like, I need to get better, you know?
mm,
And so it's really fascinating to hear about other people's journeys and other people's learning curves too, because, you know, some are short, some feels like a really direct path, some not, and some like change over time. So
mm.
it's really fascinating.
Trying to think what topic we should jump into next. Yeah, because I don't want you to get too into your current gig because that's, it's like NDA red tape.
I can talk about like my job and like go to what I do and my responsibilities, but I'll obviously won't say anything I'm not allowed to.
Yeah, so I guess you could just talk briefly about, yeah, your job title in terms of what you currently do at the studio and, like just what that entails in terms of, just general responsibilities.
Actually, when I started at Blizzard,
Hmm.
I started on the cinematics team. And like the thing that I think really drew me to them and kind of like opened my eyes to them being like a viable possibility was a lot of the Overwatch cinematics that they were doing
Hmm.
at the time. I remember falling in love with the game when it came out. I would play it constantly, like every night with friends. And
Hmm.
I remember that whenever they dropped a new cinematic, like I would at the time, I think I had like 5 or 6 people like on my team. I would stop my team and like we would all watch it together. And whenever something like cool like that dropped, I would always do that. It's great for chemistry. It's great for morale and like team building and stuff.
Hmm.
But that was some of the things that really opened my eyes to them being like a viable or like a place that I could either go to. At the time I thought of as like a stepping stone, right?
Hmm.
And so I went starting out on the cinematics team, and like sure enough, like when I got there it was filled with incredibly talented people but also like incredibly amazing people, right? Like I
Hmm.
think one of the things that they do great over there is their culture. I started out on the cinematics team doing working on cinematics for like all of their games pretty much. Like the first one I worked on was like a Hearthstone one, and then I worked on a Heroes of the Storm one. Eventually I got to work on like a couple of like Overwatch ones where like which were pretty much like dreams come true for me at that point. I think it was, I'm struggling to find the words, but not necessarily like an aha moment, but like a really an enlightening moment for me at the time because my peers, the people that I was animating with, they were from Sony Imageworks, from Weta, from Disney, from Pixar, from Blue Sky at the time, from DreamWorks, from all over the place.
Hmm.
And I was animating next to them.
Hmm.
And so I think at that point, and this might dovetail into another topic that maybe we can tackle afterwards, but it was at that point that I knew that like I had made it, and like making it, quote unquote, I know looks like a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely looked a certain way in my eyes when I was in college.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of made me realize at that point that so I was, oh, that's what I was looking for. Like I was looking for validation amongst the top in my field. Because like at the time in college and like growing up, you assume that the top of your field are like the Disneys and the Pixars and like, you know, the DreamWorks and like the Blue Sky. You
Mm-hmm.
assume that they are the top of the field and, you know, kind of want to be able to like punch at their weight and be able to hold your own. It's not necessarily that you want to work at a certain place. For me, anyway, I realized that it wasn't that I wanted to work at a certain place or work on a certain thing. While that's nice, it was that I wanted to be considered peers with them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I had definitely gotten that at that time. And I remember like slowly, like this weight and like all of this like insecurity like, being lifted off of me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So like, you know, over the years, like I got to work on some like amazing stuff, be a part of some amazing projects and cinematics, and BlizzCon is probably one of the coolest experiences because, like, as a Blizzard employee, you have to go work BlizzCon, and there's an opening ceremony where everyone there is already like hyped up to see anything Blizzard related. But then they
Mm-hmm.
open the ceremony with the cinematics that you work on, and like hearing the people's firsthand reaction to something that you've helped create or like a moment that you helped curate, and you know it wouldn't be that way without your help. Um, it's you know what I mean? That's what it is. It's what it's about. Like over time, I found my journey wanting to change again. And so I think after 4 years at the cinematics department, I eventually joined like the Overwatch team, and I've been there ever since on the game team.
No, it's awesome. It hits like a certain nerve because we've been in this industry for like, yeah, a while now. You know, we've known each other for almost 20 years and we've almost been in the industry just as long. And yeah, because when I think about it, person I know now has been in ILM. I know Travis, mutual friend of ours, he's worked with a bunch of talented people. And I think he had a similar experience working on commercials where he got to work at a studio and he looked around like, oh, this guy worked on Transformers. This guy worked on another big feature, another big feature. And then just to have that feeling, I know he experienced that. He described that to me. I haven't had it personally, but I do think, as you said, your perspective shifts after a certain while. You kind of look at your resume and you kind of look at what you worked on. You think, I kind of done it. And then, I kind of belong in this space, because I think some of us have a type of like imposter syndrome sometimes
Mm-hmm.
where like, do I belong in this space? Am I worthy of it? And then you have a bunch of people who look at you and say, yeah, you are. like, what do you mean? Like, if I don't want to associate with you, that one thing, but like, no, like there's a whole community. And that's why I find doing this podcast and reaching out to people, how many people want to collaborate, want to talk about stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of eye-opening sometimes to mention to take a step back and reevaluate things. I think that's something I've always been in a constant habit of doing. I think some people get overwhelmed by it. As you mentioned, you find that moment of peace once you kind of were able to accept, like, okay, there's no longer a sense of imposter syndrome. I am where I'm supposed to be. And I'm thinking if that's kind of what led you to another phase of your career when now you're an instructor. Now you are
Yeah.
shaping and molding the minds of future potential animators.
It's funny how, like I had mentioned, like everyone's journey is not necessarily a straight line and cookie cutter, and it's unique to every person. It changes over time, and mine definitely did. So, being now a part of the game team of like Overwatch has been a dream come true in and of itself. And, you
Mhm.
know, it's been a dream come true that I didn't even know that I had until I had gotten here,
Mm.
which is crazy, right? Because, like, you know, again, it's kind of a tricky thing in that your vision or what success or making it looks like to you can potentially be very narrowing to your vision and like your perspective. And so, being on the game team now that I am, again, amazing team, amazing coworkers. I love what I work on and what I do. And it scratches an itch in my brain that I didn't know I had until I got in here. And so there is a degree of technical responsibility, but also artistic responsibility that's like just the right amount for each sides of my brain.
Mm.
And I know it's not the same on every single game team out there. I know it's not even the same as many other game teams at the same company. But when you're a part of the animation team on Overwatch in particular, you're always considered a dev first. And so, like when I had gotten there, there was plenty to learn. And I couldn't be more excited about it. I had found about myself over the years in that I loved more than anything to learn. I'd love to learn new things, right? And so that mountain of like knowledge to like conquer and like to wade through, it was more so exciting than daunting. And I just think of it as like more tools to my Batman utility belt. You know what I mean?
There we
That's
go.
kind of the way that I view it.
Mhm.
And so on our animation team, not only are we responsible for creating the animation that we do, which is one of the only games out there that still do like hand key stylized animation,
Oh, nice.
we are also responsible for game implementation.
Yeah.
So, all of that responsibility falls on us. And it's unique in and of itself. And it's so much fun. There are transferable skills for sure, especially with how big like other engines are these days, like Unreal 5 and like obviously Unity and stuff like that. Same principles, but just the buttons are in different places. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit off topic, but kind of getting back to what I had found out in that I love to learn. I had also found that I was kind of thinking one day, I don't even remember how. I think the opportunity of teaching was presented to me. And I thought about how much it meant to me to finally find like minded people when I started taking school outside of work. Like minded people in that they wanted to learn about character animation and they were in love with it, like deeply, deeply in love with it. And how much my mentors meant to me at that time. Because at
Hmm.
the time, like it was salvation for me because it was creative fulfillment that I just wasn't able to fill at work. And
Hmm.
so like secondary schooling and like my mentors did that for me. And, I just thought that if I could be what my mentors were for me, for someone else, that's a sort of fulfillment that I don't think I'd get anywhere else. And I love it. I
Hmm.
love it. Like outside of being like a dev and an animator and all that, like I love teaching.
No, that's awesome, dude. Like I mentioned, you always had this leadership quality for as long as I'd known you to kind of like, to kind of be a light and beacon for people to kind of help guide them. So for you to say, like, when I saw you were instructing, I'm like, oh, dude, it's only a matter of time. Um, and it's true. I was kind of mentoring for a little bit. At the time, it was interesting because it was just a young kid was part of our team. And I just saw like a mirror of like, oh yeah, I used to be that timid and shy, approaching and talking to people and not wanting to
Woohoo.
admit I didn't know something and I was just calling it out. And then I was kind of like, oh, do you need help with this or with that? Help with anything. Have any questions, hit me up and I'll help you out with stuff. And that's what happened. Even now, he kind of would every once in a while hit me up about stuff. And I keep telling him, dude, I could teach you things if you need to, if you want, have the time. But he's still in the phase of like, I work and then off work, I just do whatever I want. I'm like,
Mhm.
that's cool. He's not in that habit of like, I need to work and then learn and grow. It's more of like which I understand. I was like that for a while too, because you would do so many long hours. It's like, do I want to
Mhm.
still look at work after doing like a 12, 14, even 16-hour shift? So I get it. I understand it. But he also knows like if I need to ask, there's someone there I can reach out to. And having that dynamic, I was like, family members and friends of family, there's so many teachers that I know of. And they would always ask me if that's something I wanted to do. But I'm like, no, that doesn't really scratch the itch for me, unfortunately. there's things that we're planning and trying to do where I'm like, that feels like something. And I'll let you know about that stuff if you want to be a part of things. But we're going to have like our first group discussion tomorrow. There's a lot of people still looking for work in my area, or they're just ended their contracts. So the next few weeks, I'm just like, all right, who's free? We're going to like just chat it up and just discuss a variety of topics. And the one we're going to discuss tomorrow is like work-life balance. That seems to be the number one where a lot of people I know have families. A lot of people I know don't want to do the crazy hours anymore, and they want to have more of a balance. And the reason that they feel that way is because of what's happened of late, all the recent events that have occurred. They got to work remote. They got to see their family a lot more. And it just changed the dynamic of their relationship with work, where it's like, oh, I don't have to be cranking all the time. I was missing out on stuff. I was missing out on
Mhm.
vital moments, quality time. So I'm kind of curious, man, since you've been, I think you were at Blizzard pretty much during that time. Did lockdowns affect you in any kind of way?
Yeah, so it was crazy, quite honestly. So we were 5 days a week in office. I was living out in Orange County. My girlfriend at the time was also like living out in Orange County. So like basically my life was there. And then eventually we moved out here to LA. And we moved out here so that her commute would be a lot easier.
Hmm.
And I remember it was on a Friday. We had seen some early reports on the news come in about it. And then eventually, midday on a Friday, and granted, my girlfriend at the time where she worked had them start working from home like a week before. But I remember it was a Friday. It was just past lunchtime. And we had gotten the notice like, all right, everybody go home.
Hmm.
And, nobody knew how things were going to work. Nobody knew like what we were going to do.
Hmm.
But like all credit to like the IT teams at Blizzard and the infrastructure and the systems teams and all that, we were able to start work again the following Monday.
Wow.
Crazy. As big a company as we were, as
Mhm.
global a company as we were, and like remote work never being allowed ever, 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 just due to, um, leaks and NDA materials and all that stuff. That
Yeah.
was never, ever, ever allowed. Over the span of a few days, like it happened.
Hmm.
And it was crazy. Like I'm one of the very fortunate few that was able to keep my job during the pandemic, and I
Hmm.
was able to work from home, and you know, we quarantined and did all that good stuff just like everybody else did. And so I want to say that like at the time that it happened, it didn't affect me greatly as far as work goes.
Hmm.
And I'll also venture to say that it also didn't affect me as far as like my perspective on things go, because like I know that like I value my family very, very, highly, as do I do with my friends. But at the time when I started at Blizzard, I actually had just started seeing, my girlfriend. And yeah, not long after we got together, I just knew that she was my person. And so
Hmm.
like come to find after all these years later, like we're married now. And like I have a stepson, and we're living out here in LA together. But
Hmm.
um as far as the pandemic goes, it didn't shift work so much for me as much, and it didn't necessarily shift my perspective on things as much, because like you had said, right, that grind of like learning and stuff and working and like learning after hours, it took away a lot of time that I would have normally had, experiencing other things in life. And now being at where I'm at and like in the position that I'm in, I want to take full advantage of that.
No, for sure. Yeah, that's something I always value and appreciate is like your connection with family. Like you always be going back home. But it'd be like once a year. Like I think you're always like going back to the Philippines to see extended family. And um I know you're very close with other like siblings and relatives you have out there. I think you, Angie, is something I always value and appreciated. And again, it's like I didn't look at that with envy at all. When it comes down to it, once you find your tribe, your people, or you have a good family unit. You sustain and you uphold that.
I think in mine and G's case, like there's definitely a big culture aspect to it. Like he and I both have big families on all sides here, and like oddly enough, in the same exact place in the Philippines.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's crazy, but that was definitely like an element to it. Yeah, as you were saying, like once you kind of find it, you do everything you can to protect it, take care of it.
I think that's why we're all like so close because we all instantly kind of saw something in each other that we recognize and we respected. And we all, for a long time, I mean, it wasn't until like very recent. We used to be like all the time, dude. And it's like, I remember I would tell people, like, man, I'll be like, worked so many shifts. Who knows when I had a day off? And then one of the homies would be like, yo, we meeting up here today. Like, all right. And they'd be like, Mike, why you pass on the floor, bro? I'm like, yo, I'm tired. I had to work
I
a lot,
remember.
but I'm here because, yeah, that meant a lot. Like we saw each other as like brothers for one another. Even like Travis's at the time girlfriend, now wife, she was like the homegirl. She was like part of the crew. And it was at their wedding when we first met her friends. And we were like, you have your own friends? We had no idea. Like how long? Like, oh, I've known them like the whole time been in school. Like we never hear you speak about them. You never said like, oh, we can't hang out with you guys. Like every time we hung out as a crew, she was always there.
Like we were family and we
Mhm.
treated each other as such. And like, that extended to her as well, obviously.
Yeah. It mostly shifted when everyone started to have their own families. And that began a shift. And also what happened recently, I think. Like I've personally found it hard to kind of reestablish like that type of quality time with people. So I'm kind of at the moment, uh, what is it like supplementing that with these kind of podcasts and conversations, but still reconnecting. And I do
Yeah.
plan to venture out and reconnect with people once I actually own a car again.
Yeah, I was gonna say, everybody, you're doing it in your own way. Like I hope you don't discredit yourself for like not doing it in the way that everybody else does. That wouldn't be fair to you, and that's just not true.
Yeah, for sure. But at the end, we're still the same. Like I said, we could just pick it up where we left off, and it's not that big of a deal. I plan to keep the channels for conversation open, and we see how things look moving forward. I think, yeah, with G, I know he's building a portfolio right now. We've been loosely talking about it. He's had me look at stuff. I feel like we both give G notes on things. He showed me some. He's like, I need to work on my presentation. I'm like, yeah, I'm just quickly glancing. You could do this and this to some of the stuff you just posted. All right, cool. And yeah, I'm developing ideas again. So I definitely want to be creative with him on that front. And I know you guys still like regularly keep in contact. I know for a time, I don't know if they were just for fun, but I think they were like
Mhm.
mobile type games you guys would make in your spare time.
Yeah, so I will say that like even at my busiest, G and I have always found time for each other weekly. Like we would meet once or twice a week, either to just be in each other's company, to just hang out, or we love collaborating with each other. Yeah,
Mhm.
even if it doesn't really like most of the time, or even sometimes it doesn't really amount to anything. I think we just value collaborating with each other more than anything else. It's like there's so much satisfaction, there's so much fulfillment in the process itself. And
Mm,
like it's kind of goes along with like the realization of like art, like in a career, in that like you have to love it, and like a lot of the satisfaction and a lot of the fulfillment comes in the road and not the destination, right, in the journey, and like during the crafting, you know what I mean? And so like even now we still meet about things like there were mobile games for a while, and then there were like physical card games for a while,
mm,
and then like 3D games, and even like board games.
yeah.
It's never ending, and I hope it really does never end. He's clearly my best friend.
Yeah, dude, I spent like forever kicking myself on the side when I wasn't there for his wedding, you know? Yeah, because I haven't traveled. I have a thing about like traveling now. Yeah, but I remember seeing that because Tina, man, his wife, I would just treat her like a little sister, bro. It was just so funny when we hanging out, and I would just be like, like fun, like joking jabs like a brother would do to his sister, just kind of like
Dude.
poking fun at each other. And it was just such a funny environment where it's like, because I always view G, and you and Trav like brothers and stuff. So, because I don't have any siblings, so I always have like a type of like dynamic like that with other people. Which is why some people would kind of get annoyed that I wouldn't just casually hang out with them just to casually hang out because we happen to work together, this or that. And I'm like, dude, it's like either we're like super tight like this, or just someone that I know. And I've always had that kind of dynamic, and it would upset people, but it's like, yo, because my friends, they know me through and through, and we just connect on a level that it's just like we just know that we're on the same page and that we can get along on a variety of levels without having to put in all this extra effort to try to make something work. It just
No,
gels.
never.
It
Yeah.
just clicks. So I'm like, sorry. I'm like, I just don't have that dynamic with everybody. And I'm okay with that. And I'm aware that other people aren't so much. But that's for them to sort through.
It's true. It's true.
I feel like we covered a lot. I think without having to ask the question, I think you've already answered it for me, which off air I mentioned the fact that I was thinking about asking you, is Pixar on the list? Is it still a goal
Mm.
that must be achieved for you since it was a lifelong dream to be a
Mhm.
Pixar animator? Is it still something that you would like to do? But I feel like you already kind of answered that question, but I don't know if you want to give a final thought on that.
Yeah, no. I don't think it is, only just from it's like the validation from my peers, obviously, and probably even beyond that. That's kind of given me like the fulfillment that I was looking for. And what's
Mhm.
funny? Even when I had gotten that, right? Like there are just different aspects of life that felt equally as unfulfilled. I won't say empty, but like unfulfilled.
Mhm.
And so, like at that point, I just wanted to, you know, find fulfillment in those areas. And, you know, I can happily say that I have in like finding my wife and my stepson, and like obviously like where I am with my career at the moment, being able to teach and be there for like other young binding artists in the way that my mentors were for me.
That's awesome, man. I think in closing, is there anything now that you are an instructor, you probably would have a few pearls of wisdom, but is there anything left that you want to say to someone who wants to get into the artistic field, doing something along the lines of what we do for a living?
Yeah. Okay. So like this is a good one. I could go for a long time about this one, but I'll try and keep it short.
Mhm.
So I've actually found in working with a lot of different people, especially in the day and age that we kind of live in, technology moves so fast. But the things that don't change, though, that will never ever change by definition, are the fundamentals. So, more than anything else, make sure you have a strong foundation to build your house upon. Because, software changes, tools change almost weekly sometimes. You know what I mean? That's
Mhm.
incredibly fast.
Yeah.
But if you have solid foundations, those are transferable skills to almost any art form. And there's a couple of keywords that I use in my classes a lot that I think can be like, I guess, used as a lot of like somewhat of mantras, right? It's going to take a lot of patience. It's going to take a lot of persistence. It'll take a lot of perseverance. And I think more than anything, it's going to take a lot of practice. And, I think the sooner that you can kind of come to the realization and fully understand and accept that, that's kind of the battle half won.
No, that's legit, man. I don't know if it's going to come up in the work-life balance conversation tomorrow, but I know one of my friends told me that he's also a stepdad. Just recently, his baby was
Mhm.
born over the weekend, so he's ecstatic about that. But it's funny because he told me that, like, yeah, like my kids, they don't have homework.
Mhm. They don't. It's so weird. It's so weird.
I'm just like, how? And I told my mom that, and she was freaking out harder than I was because I'm just like, I don't under it. Just it makes no sense to me because, like you mentioned, just the basic principle of just practice
Mhm.
of this is what you learn in class today. Now go home and practice it. Because I know for sure, you tell me something the first time, I ain't gonna remember. As you
Yeah.
mentioned, people have different learning curves. I learned this, I told this in my game group when we play fighting games, because they always wonder, why am I slow to adapt to things? I'm like, bro, I understand. You're going to hit me with that mix up about 100 times. Once I got it, ain't gonna work on me anymore. But I'm gonna have to get hit by 100 times for me to learn how to defend and how to punish. And anyway, I'm going on a tangent with fighting games, but that's why it's something I couldn't understand. Like, and another important thing you mentioned, persistence, right?
Mhm.
And even patience. But he mentioned to me like how his kids were easily just giving up.
Mhm.
They would come to something that they couldn't solve and they would just throw their hands up and walk away. And he had to be
Yeah.
like, no, 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 no. You need to
Mhm.
figure this out.
Mhm.
Oh, but I don't, it's too big of a, let's break it down. Let's
Mhm.
simplify it. Let's break it down into steps. And now you've
Mhm.
accomplished the entire task and now it's complete. Like he had to do this
Mhm.
with his son having to clean his room.
Mhm.
And he's like, I don't know how to clean my
Yeah.
room. And he's like,
Yeah.
well, just put the dirty clothes in the hamper, just make your
Mhm.
bed, just put things on the shelf, clean up everything off the floor. Now you just clean your room. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. You know, but very fundamental skills that we kind of take for granted. But, I give it up to my friend who's like, sounds like super dad to me every time he breaks down what he has to do on a daily basis. And I know you're a great dad, and I know Travis is as well. So I don't have to worry about you guys, but some other people, I'm like, yo, man, I'm worried about these kids. I'm worried about, future drivers of America.
Yeah, that's funny that you mentioned that. A couple of things to that, right? Where that was very foreign to me hearing that like the whole thing with homework, and I think it's very foreign to it just because of our experience to it, or with it, excuse me, while growing up is very different, right? There's a line in The Incredibles too where they say Mr. Incredible is like helping Dash with his homework. He's like, he says, why would they change math? Math is math. And like, I know what he's talking about. You know what I mean? Like the way that we learn is like the traditional vertical method, and we learn through drilling through repetition and memorization,
Yeah.
right? Whereas like nowadays, they try and teach it a lot more flexibly, right? With a lot more
Mm,
flexibility and a lot of different strategies, because like we had mentioned over and over, everyone has a different learning curve, but I think more importantly, everybody learns differently. So one way may not be the optimal way for someone else, right? And it's not
mhm.
that one person is like quote unquote dumb. They're just not being taught the right way. So they're being taught like a lot of different strategies. And at the core of it, it's still math. So if you understand math, it doesn't matter what strategy you use,
Right.
you'll still be able to arrive at the same conclusion, or
Hmm.
able to understand like any other strategy. And like aside from that, like going back to homework, I think the thing that concerns me most about it missing is just not necessarily practicing what you learn, but it's more so the aspect of accountability and
Mm,
responsibility.
hmm.
And so, like, when that gets taken away, because it feels like it holds somewhat of a different importance and maybe like a more serious importance when it comes from someone that's not your parents, you know?
Hmm.
And so you take it a little bit more seriously because you're being held accountable by people aside from like your parents. And so like we have to recreate that sense and that practice of accountability and responsibility in other ways.
Mm.
And I'll say thankfully he's been fantastic at it and we don't have to worry about him.
Awesome. I would always remember seeing him like doodle at like the dinner table. What
Oh, that's right. Oh my God. That's right.
was that Italian restaurant? Was
Uh
it Buca? Right?
yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
all that food and no flavor. Yeah, Buca. I remember we would go and yeah, I would see him doodling and I remember you'd be like checking in, like, okay. And then you might give him like a pointer or a
Yeah.
note on stuff, and oh, and then he'll just keep drawing. So I'm kind of curious to see if in the future he follows in the does he still draw?
He does. Yeah, yeah. He's got creative outlets to him, and like he's mentioned a couple of times, like having interest in them eventually ending up in the industry. Well, like we'll see where it goes. Like I'm not one to force it on him, and I'm not
Mm,
one to like tell him to do it or like do it even a certain way. If he finds his way to it, I think it's important that he does that versus me guiding him or kind of forcing it on him. And
Mhm.
that kind of reminds me, sorry, maybe this might be like a nice way to tie things back to fighting games, but I'm not one to let people win. Like we've mentioned, like I've always been very competitive. I'm not a very good loser. I'm also not one to let people win. That includes my stepson. And so like when we play games together,
Mm.
my wife has mentioned, oh, you should let him win. And I told her and I told him, I'm like, if you want to beat me, you got to beat me. You understand?
Right.
He would get frustrated at times and like rightfully so. But then come to find that one day, like at the end of school, I think it was the last day. And like there was a day where the teachers would open their classrooms and they got to go to all the different classrooms. They were doing different activities in each classroom, right? And in one classroom, they were having Smash Brothers tournament.
Ooh.
They were having a Smash Brothers Ultimate tournament.
Okay.
Come to find out that like that day and the way they would play, it's not tournament like, but it's fine. They're kids. So I think they're playing like 4v4, free for all or something, or 8-player free for all. Winner stays on,
Hmm.
right? So if you win, you don't have to give up the stick or you don't have to give up your controller. Come to find that he jumps on and he never has to get off. And then he was telling me about it. And I told him, I was like, dude, you know why? He's like, no, why? And it's like, it's because all those times that I didn't let you win. And so now we talk about it. It's a cool story that we have.
Yeah, dude. It just reminds me of like people I play with. It's a Mortal Kombat game group. Um, and then they're slowly playing more games because they realize I play everything. So um eventually they're like, oh, Mike, you got Street Fighter 6, yeah? You got Tekken? Yeah. You're gonna be playing 2XK when it drops? Of course. I need something to scratch the Marvel itch, and that's just gonna have to supplement until the real game comes out. It's like when I play multiverses every day, people are like, why you play it? I'm
Oh
like,
no.
because I'm like, I don't have a Switch and I can't bring myself to buy a system for one game. But what about Mario and Zelda? Like, no, 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 no. If I owned a Switch, there's only one game on that console. Let's be clear. They're like, why you like this, Mike? I'm like, you understand my college days, bro. Because there'll be times where I would just be on crazy like losing streaks. And then they're like, it doesn't like bother you just losing the whole time. And then I just come up on everybody and just destroy them like an hour later. Just because I had to assess what everyone did and I come in and destroy everybody. And there's like, man, like where did it come from? I'm like, dude, that comes from being destroyed by a friend of mine named Stephen Eusebio, where he would not let you win. And I had to learn to hold that and be okay with that and be like, it's okay. Because everyone else will suffer because Steven made me suffer. So I understand your son very well. Uh, as it should be. And that's the thing, dude. Like knowing how to hold that L. I heard it from someone that I don't want to quote who it came from, but turning those L's into lessons. As I always say, I keep an open mind, open ear. I don't really care where it's coming from. If it's someone that I don't even want to be associated with, they may have something to say that's a wise, piece of wisdom. I'll take that little nugget and I'll make some gold out of it. But yeah, man, I think that's the last bit of wisdom we'll impart on listeners. Yeah, man. So I want to thank you for spending time with me, Stephen. Always a pleasure, man.
Likewise, dude. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a minute. Definitely I'll be trying to reach out more regular.
Yeah, please do.
Of late, I've been mad busy with all this.
Busy is good, man.
Yeah, that's what keeps me afloat. That's what keeps me going. I'm just so used to like you got to be grinding and cracking on things. If you're not, I'm just like, what am I doing? And then it reminds me, oh yeah, I still need to land a gig. But the emails are coming around of late, so I'm hoping things are
Great.
shifting, things are changing. If
Yeah.
not, I got like a whole list of things to dive into for the rest of the year. In terms of making content, I'm still scraping by. I kind of need a real job, but I have no more car to sell. So, it keeps going, man. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. And be sure to check the next one.